back to Kincraig Castle Hotel, high above the Cromarty Firth. I'm Nicky Marr and I'm here, we're putting together a video for Highland news and media channels about Opportunity Cromarty Firth. There's going to be a new green freeport in Scotland. In fact, there are going to be two. Cromarty Firth could be one of them. I'm here with three of the people who have put the bid together. Joanne Alday from Port of Cromarty Firth, Joanne, Steve Chisholm, who is from Global, and Derek Loudon, the chair of Highland Council's Corporate Resources Committee. These three have been working for the last 18 months to put a bid together. Now, this is the second of two videos that we've recorded. If you haven't seen part one, then you do need to watch that first, because that gives us really the idea of what a green port is, what a green free port is, and the benefits that it could bring to our area. It also really says that the governments will pretty well be lacking in their duties if they don't make our area one of Scotland's two green free ports. So we've really just talked about the basics so far. 5 final bidders. We should find out later this summer whether we are one of the, it says up to 2 on the Scottish Government website, which worries me slightly, but hopefully there will be 2 and we will be one of them. Joanne, just a reminder, what is a green free port in a sentence if you can?
Green free ports were a government initiative between UK and Scottish governments to really level up the country and speed progress towards net zero.
Okay, so it's an idea, basically a pump of money into the area, but also lots of massive tax benefits.
Yep, there's a package of tax reliefs and customs benefits and seed funding. It's a really clever model that the two governments have brought together that pulls lots of different levers to try and attract inward investment into any region that's successful. It's working really well in England. They were awarded freeport status last year at 8 sites. So we know the model works. We're now seeing it in action, and now it's Scotland's turn to compete.
Okay. Steve, you've been involved with the bid for a while. There is a geographical area. We're in the Cromarty Firth. We've got the Nig Yard just behind us. We've got the port in Vergordon where all the cruise liners come in just down there. And this is your constituency, I believe as well, or just on the fringes of it, Derek. What is the area? I mean, how many people are going to benefit from this if it comes our way?
Well, it's transformational for the whole region. In fact, the impact that the Cromarty bid can have goes well beyond the region. It goes across Scotland and it goes across the UK's ambitions and targets, particularly for net zero and energy security. But in a nutshell, it's the opportunity to create 25,000 jobs, 15,000 of those being here in the Highlands. And at the same time, it lets us create an industrial super hub, creating a renaissance in manufacturing that we've not seen in decades, and a hotbed of innovation that will allow us to have technologies and lead the world in emerging technologies like hydrogen and floating wind.
Now that all sounds incredibly positive, incredibly just fantastic, and an opportunity not just for this generation, but for generations to come. But we can't, you said 25,000 jobs, 15,000 of them in our area. You can't help but see some of the headlines and know that there aren't always enough people to fill the jobs and the vacancies that we have. And where are they going to live and how are they going to educate their children? Has that all been thought through?
Well, I think the first answer, Nicky, is it's not like we haven't done it before.
Okay.
You know, in the early 1900s when the Navy came here, this area had 35,000 people involved with the Navy and the work that they brought to the area. The oil industry came from nowhere and turned a barren beach into one of the largest industrial sites for manufacturing oil and gas in the world. And we had about 10 to 15,000 people employed between Nig and Ardersier and many more thousands environs round about. So we've done it before. This will be our third go at doing this. So we've got track record. And of course, we've got partners in Highland Council that have been working on us throughout this 18 months, talking about those very things. It's about housing, it's about education, it's about schools, it's about health. And that's why this is a total collaboration and partnership. This is a bid that has the solution in the round. There are no gaps in it.
No gaps in that. Derek, you're nodding. What are the plans then? I mean, I don't know how much of it is in the public domain. What can you tell us about where people will live, where they will educate their children? how the healthcare system is going to be supported, because these are concerns.
Yeah, I'm okay to speak about this. Our development plans team have been working on the Inner Moray Firth local development plan. That's been revised at the moment. It's out to consultation. People can go and have a look at that on the Highland Council website. But there are plans in there for a very large, substantial house building programme in the Easter Ross area and more widely in the Highlands. So in terms of housing, we're provided for. We have a new school just about to commence construction in Tain. Allness Academy's very modern. So the school's infrastructure is part of that. Is part of that ongoing process. And I think in terms of healthcare as well, there have been upgrades locally, and I know that the economy and infrastructure staff are looking with NHS Highland, who we work with very closely, at a hospital provision as well. So, we too think we have all the bases covered.
Great. So it's not just going to be a case of suddenly 25,000 people and their families descending on Easter Ross. Where are we going to stay? What's going to happen? It is all thought through. It is all covered off, so we can reassure everybody on that front. Great. Now,
I think, sorry, I'll just add to that. This isn't happening tomorrow. This, for the first time in a long time, we're able to look into a crystal ball at the moment and see what is coming down the tracks. So we've got time to prepare and plan and make sure that we have that infrastructure in place and that people have the skills that are going to be required. So we can make sure that that all happens as it should, because we've got that forewarning. They're not about to descend on us tomorrow. And we hope most of those workers will actually be workers that already live here.
Because there are so many people who live here, their families are here, but because there isn't the work, they have to go, if they're in oil and gas, perhaps offshore or abroad, they can come home, they can live with their families and be here full time and have really good, decent, well-paid family jobs. So let's talk about those jobs, because in the previous video, and if you haven't watched it, watch that now, we talked about some of the innovation. We talked about how Scotland has been a powerhouse of innovation for centuries, and what we're doing is pretty well building on that. And these are not going to be jobs where everybody has to get their hands dirty. We're talking about design. We're talking about, well, what are we talking about? You're innovation man at Global. Tell us what the jobs will look like.
Much cleaner. I mean, I think if we take the contrast with oil and gas, that was very much male dominated.
Yes.
It wasn't something that was seen as clean. It wasn't attractive to ladies to get into, although some did and did very well. But the main, it was seen as being male dominated. Whereas what we're seeing now as we go into the primary schools, the secondary schools, kids are talking about jobs with purpose. They want clean, well paid, and they want sustainable jobs. As Joanne says, we can now look ahead decades of sustainable jobs, getting rid of the peaks and troughs of employment that went along with oil and gas so many times. So we're talking about the factories of the future, which literally you could pretty much eat your dinner off the floor in. Highly automated equipment, skilled jobs to operate the equipment, to maintain it. Looking at new technologies being brought in, lots of work for developers, scientists, kind of all types, even looking at some of the environmental impacts, because it's not just about building out the manufacturing of the floating wind structures, it's about all the science that sits behind. How does that impact the environment? How do we make more intelligent use of electricity? How do we develop the smart grids of tomorrow that can intelligently put the power where it's needed, instead of just wisely sending it blindly down a power line to go to maybe where it's not needed. So a lot more intelligence needed about how we apply power. So every aspect of this is about high quality jobs. We're looking at robotics, we're looking at new materials being used, looking at lots of new opportunities, particularly in electronics, the opportunity to create jobs for people who come out of the armed forces. And what we see coming from the young people is that they say, we want jobs with purpose. We want jobs that we can go to sleep at night knowing something we've done today has helped protect the planet for our children and generations to come. And the opportunity here is to do just that.
goodness. So we're basically then reversing. I mean, I suppose I just look at my own life, and I suppose that's what we all need to do, is look at our own lives and see what's happened. When I was at school in Stonehaven, just south of Aberdeen, in the 80s, all of our physics, all the lads from our physics and maths classes, the ones who were good and bright and into that engineering type thing, left school after 5th year and they went off to RGIT, as it was, Robert Gordon University now, and they worked in jobs that helped them understand how to work offshore and how to do the work that the oil and gas industry needed then. Now they've all gone off and they're all living abroad and doing whatever they're doing now. And then I look at my daughters, who are, young women in their early 20s, one of them working in engineering, but they went away. And one of them has come back, but kind of reluctantly and only because of COVID. We're talking about there being opportunities for today's children, tomorrow's children. And we're talking about attracting people into our area because there are really, really good jobs for them. There is an incentive as part of the package for upskilling, isn't there? As part of the sort of Green Freeport deal.
Yeah, very much so. So we know it's really important to keep people here. The forecasts are for a 10% decline in working age population in the Highlands over the next 20 years. And we know that's a multi-generational problem. You speak to people on the islands and they'll tell you their kids went to university in Glasgow or Edinburgh. They don't expect them to come home except at Christmases and big birthdays. They expect them to live away. And as you say, some people will come back. Often if they're having children, they want to bring them up in this amazing environment. Yeah. We want people not to have to go away in the first place. We want people to have that choice. And by giving them the skills and telling them about the opportunities here, I mean, we're not just talking about floating wind. We've got fixed wind, we've got onshore wind, we've got pumped storage, we've got nuclear components being made.
There's hydrogen.
There's green hydrogen. Green hydrogen and floating wind are the emerging sectors that are really exciting. So they can give people hopefully jobs for decades, that they can learn to use their skills here, help us decarbonise as a country, but then export those skills to other countries and help other countries decarbonise. And as Steve said, these are really exciting opportunities for people.
World-changing jobs.
Absolutely.
From right here.
From on their doorstep.
On their doorstep.
Yeah.
Now talk to me about the sort of, there's a national insurance kind of tax break that's helping to fund some of the upskilling. Who wants to talk about that?
Yeah, we made a decision as a consortium very early on that we didn't want to displace work. So it's very easy when a competition like this comes along that if somebody wins, then of course somebody loses, and you can just move work to that place. And it doesn't mean it's new work for the country, it just means it's moved. You're just moving the same stuff around the country. We decided as a consortium that was complete and utter nonsense and was not the idea behind the bid. That wasn't what the governments were trying to achieve, and we didn't want to have any part of that. We wanted to make sure there was no reason to displace work. So everything that we've done in our bid is about new to UK, or certainly new to Scotland. So these are investments that just wouldn't happen if they didn't happen here. This is actually new activity, new jobs, new investment. The national insurance one is an interesting one because from a local company, if you're outside the fence of the freeport, you don't receive the national insurance benefits, which are one of the tax reliefs.
And the national insurance benefits are?
So if you recruit new staff, then the government will give you a relief, or you don't have to pay quite so much national insurance for the first few years. It's only for a few years, then it goes back to normal.
Within that fence,
within the fence of the freeport boundary,
area, which is a boundary of about sort of
45 kilometres.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can have a company sat outside that boundary who says, well, I need to move inside the boundary then to make sure that I can have that benefit, and I can recruit staff for slightly less and compete with the people inside the freeport. Again, we thought that was nonsense. Yeah. Why would you want to just move the same pieces of the puzzle around to different places? So we said, well, in order to just take that off the table completely, we will reinvest all of those national insurance reliefs into a central training fund that everybody benefits from.
Okay.
The Scottish Government really seemed to like that initiative because it was actually written in then to the Green Freeport bidding process.
Okay. Well, surely that's a good sign.
We hope so.
And you're working that money then, you're sort of upskilling people to stay, inviting them to come back or to come for the first time. And you're working with UHI, who are looking at creating courses that you are going to need. So what will your industry need in future? What skills will the young people coming out of education need in order to slot into those jobs, those roles? And it's a neat synergy, which is, I guess, is why they're part of the consortium.
Absolutely. UHA was obviously an absolute no-brainer for us. We had to have the academic partners in the consortium, and they've worked with us for most of the 2 years we've been working on the bid. They were, again, one of the early core of consortium members. But it does go broader than UHI. So the Powerhouse project, as Steve mentioned on, I think, number one, and should I remind everybody to watch that? We created a skills and innovation vehicle called the Powerhouse, and the working group that sits underneath that is made up of offshore wind developers, hydrogen companies, partners across Scotland and actually further afield. So St Andrews University, the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland, is based out of Strathclyde. These are all members of that working group, because what we're trying to achieve here is much bigger than just the Highlands. This has benefits, as Steve said, across Scotland and across the UK. So we need to pull that expertise together to put the skills programmes together, the research and development together, and really accelerate these sectors.
Okay, so we've got the geography, we've got the deep port that everybody needs, we've got the land mass for the construction of all the gubbins, all the stuff. You're the technical people, I'm just here to ask the questions. So we've got the land mass, we've got the geography, we will have the skilled workforce, and we have the way of skilling them, upskilling them. We've got the capacity to welcome that increased population, and we've got Highland Council in the case for all of the necessary services and homes and things there. What about the competition? What do they have? So there's 5 people finally, or 5 areas finally put in a bid, and up to 2. I'm worried about that phrase, up to 2. Do we know it's definitely going to be 2, or is it up to 2? Could it just be 1?
We're pretty sure it's going to be 2.
Okay.
And in England, they said they were going to have 7 and awarded 8.
Okay.
So
well, let's go with 2
let's
then.
go with 2.
So there are 5 others. Who's going to run through the other 4? 4 others.
So we've got Orkney.
Uh-huh.
I think by their own admission, they're putting a placeholder in for future funding because they're adjacent to some of the projects, but not the scale of projects that sits further south, if you like.
So is it rude to discount Orkney then, or are they discounting themselves?
I think their ambitions are to set the stage for some future investment in a future round.
Right.
But clearly they are positioned near some of the ScotWind sites, and they will have a part to play in that process, but most likely a smaller part. You're then left with Glasgow, the Clyde bid. That's on the wrong coast. If you look at the map of ScotWind, and it's out there on many public domains to look at, the energy, bear in mind that Scotland has 25% of Europe's wind and tidal wave energy resources, and the bulk of that percentage actually sits around the coasts of the Highlands and Islands.
And of course, the Highlands and Islands have something ridiculous, like about, because of all the ins and outs and all the islands. It's something ridiculous, and this is the wrong statistic, but something like a half of all of the UK's coastline is the Highlands and Islands because of all the ins and outs.
Yeah, no, it's a massive coastline. So Glasgow, frankly, it may have ambitions as a traditional port. It may have a rail link, but in terms of meeting those 4 criteria of the bid, our considered view and that of others that are quite impartial would be it's not in the right place.
Okay.
It may be a future home for shipbuilding or other strategies for the future, but as far as the 4 tenants of this tender are concerned,
this particular thing, yes,
we don't see that as being a good fit. So then you're left with Aberdeen and Peterhead's bid, and the one of Edinburgh, and the Fourth Ports bid, which covers Leith and Grangemouth. They have aspirations to develop as a port for offshore wind and more renewables, and no doubt over time they'll grow. But to meet these energy security targets of the scale, we need to hit the ground running. And when you look at the activities going on behind us in the Cromarty Firth today, the track record that Port of Cromarty Firth have got, the track record we've got at Nig, there isn't another port in Scotland that's done it and is doing it. They're having to start from a standing start. That's not a safe place to put the public funds if you want to guarantee success. You really want to place additional investment in somewhere where that groundwork's already been done, where there's already been success and proven experience. So Aberdeen and Peterhead, clearly in a good location, not as good a location as we are. There's some of the ScotWind sites close to them, but not nearly as many as are close to us. We think probably the technology plays in hydrogen, that companies like Starega have placed their faith in opportunity at Cromarty Firth, probably will lead the world in hydrogen development. We think we're unique in having a venture for the building of small modular reactor facilities. It's not talking about bringing nuclear power here into
So
the
we're not
Highlands.
rebuilding a new
We're not rebuilding Dounreay, but what we are is state-of-the-art manufacturing of modules that can go anywhere in the UK or overseas in nuclear. I think that's also quite unique. And the ground loadings, the water depths here are so much bigger, and you only need to look at the geography of Aberdeen and Peterhead and of the Forth ports to see there's a dramatic difference in natural aptitudes between theirs and ours. The other thing probably that's worth kind of thinking about is that Aberdeen became it was the undisputed oil capital of Europe.
Yep.
Nobody would question that. But if you ask the follow-on question, how many major pieces of infrastructure of oil and gas were built in Aberdeen? How many jackets, how many topsides? The answer would be zero. But it became the cultural, the kind of engineering centre of excellence for that, with the right decision here from the two governments to place a freeport here in the Cromarty Firth. That same boom in the intellectual engineering, the project management skills, the myriad of support services, Aberdeen can be that centre of excellence in a similar way. So one message we would have is, if history has given us a pretty successful model in oil and gas, manufacturing and heavy industry here in the Highlands where it's best suited, and the project management, the general sort of engineering, the technological infrastructure that come out of Aberdeen, there's a place for that as well. Make the wrong decision and place the free ports only in Edinburgh or Aberdeen and not do anything here in the Cromarty Firth, then I think that whole capability, that whole capacity is lost to the governments, and
So
they will fail to meet their targets.
Am I listening to you adding up 2 and 2 and getting 57 and thinking that what you're saying for that is that ministers should make us and Aberdeen the two preferred bids?
No, I think what I'm saying is that the Cromarty Firth with one other works. Others without the Cromarty Firth fails and just doesn't meet what the basic
So
tenets
this
of the bid
is
are
the
trying to do.
only sensible option, the only sensible decision that ministers can make is to have Opportunity Cromarty Firth as number 1, and then they can choose whichever other one they like, because you'll be happy to work with anybody.
We're already collaborating with most of the ports, and what the industry needs is more collaboration going forward. We've seen political collaboration on an unprecedented scale here within our bid. We're seeing two ports that frankly a few years ago we'd have cut each other's throats to win business. We've been working together for 2 years and will continue to do so very well and very amicably to deliver this and for the future. So yeah, I think you're right. The governments should choose wisely.
Industry.
It's their voice.
How many times do you see industry come together, competitors come together and put their names behind a bid like this?
A public letter, and some of the people who have supported you, reel off some of the names. We've got huge players.
Shell are probably the most recognisable. Scottish Power Renewables, SSE, Falk Renewables, Blue Float Energy, Ørsted, they're the biggest offshore wind developer in the world. Ocean Winds, who've developed both the Moray East and the Moray West wind farms off our shores. SSE developed Beatrice, of course. And all of those projects, both of those projects were marshalled out of the Cromarty Firth. We have the best track record of anywhere in Scotland. And these companies are coming together and saying, this is the only location. That's their exact words. They're not saying this is the best location. They're saying this is the only location that can compete with foreign ports and bring this work here at the pace and the scale that's required.
And that letter, that open letter, is on the Opportunity Cromarty Firth website. All the signatures are there, so anybody who wants to check what you're saying, it's all there and it's all in the public domain. And of course there's cross-party political support from right across the Highlands for it to come here, and Moray as well. What have I not asked you? What is the thing that you think, no, we have to get that in, we have to say, but there's this, don't forget. I'm hearing that it can only be here, that industry need it to be here, that local people need to get behind it so that it can be here, that this is a fantastic opportunity for this generation, for future generations, and for generations to come. And it's a brilliant opportunity for our area and our people to lead the drive towards net zero, not just for Scotland, but for the rest of the UK, and to help the rest of the world catch up too. Have I missed anything?
I think it's the one thing I would say is we have spare capacity in electricity generation. I think if you look at any other part of the UK, no other area has the spare capacity. If we are going to get to net zero, we're going to have to produce a lot of hydrogen. If we're producing hydrogen, this is the only place that can do it at scale. It's the only one that's got so much spare capacity at the moment, and that spare capacity is going to grow. You know, we have big pumped storage hydro schemes going in. We have Scotland, the offshore wind capacity being built. It will be installed. We're the place that can produce hydrogen on a global scale. It's going to create great jobs for people. It's going to create hope in this community. And I really want to see us win the bid. And for all of those positives, the levelling up agenda, this is where
this is how they can actually put their money where their mouth is.
This is where it should be.
With the levelling up. If they're serious about levelling up, then actually we need to see a bit of that pie as well.
Absolutely. And this is all about taking advantage of an opportunity that is coming to the UK and coming to our shores in Scotland, that is probably Scotland's biggest industrial opportunity, and is certainly the Highlands' biggest opportunity to really put ourselves on the map and play the role that we can play in decarbonisation and impacting climate change positively. There's nothing else coming down the tracks.
And there's nothing wrong with ambition. So grab that ambition. And we have to take it because, I spoke over you there. There's nothing else coming down the tracks.
No, this is it for the Highlands. You know, other places may have other opportunities. Oil and gas is having a resurgence in Aberdeen. You know, there are plans in other parts of the world, as Steve was alluding to with Glasgow. They've got aerospace, shipbuilding. There's some really great things happening there. Orkney are doing some phenomenal work on research and development. Everybody's got a part to play in this opportunity, but if we don't have a freeport here, all of those different elements will be suboptimal as far as offshore wind is concerned and offshore renewables. It's about how big a piece of the pie can the UK and Scotland have.
So Steve, if people are watching this and thinking, well, actually, how can I get behind that? It's not too late.
No, it's not too late. And you know, it's fantastic. Highland News Media are putting these couple of videos out there so people can learn more about it, because you know there's a real danger, Nicky, that people think this is about businesses getting bigger and richer. This isn't. This is the opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime to transform a whole region. It's about jobs for kids. It's about jobs to the 2050s and 60s and beyond. It's about jobs that ultimately our children's children will have. So if you're coming new to this, watching these videos for the first time, and you haven't done anything to support this bid, you've not written an email to your MP or MSP, put a letter to the paper, put posts up, done anything on social media, don't wake up in September to read the newspaper news that we've lost this bid to someone else, because you'll have to explain to your kids why they'll have to leave home to go to university. They won't be able to come back to their families and bring them up here in the area they were born in. There's so much to lose here. The loss is on a comparable scale to the size of the opportunity. You know, if you haven't done anything yet, go do it now.
Absolutely. Well, that is a perfect note on which to leave it. Derek, Joanne, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for talking in layman's terms about what it is, the size of the opportunity here. And over to you. You've heard what he'd have said. Just get behind this bid if you possibly can. Write the letter, share all the stuff on social media, share these videos, talk to whoever you meet about it, and let's try and get behind this bid as much as we possibly can. because as Steve says, we do not want to be waking up in September, October, whenever the decision is made, and finding it's gone elsewhere. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.